Today's notes, we're going to talk about energy from the sun. So there's your heading, energy from the sun. All right, so what happens to the energy from the sun? So the sun is going to shoot rays, UV rays, heat towards us. What happens to it, okay? So maybe write that down. What happens to energy from the sun? If I'm going too fast, you can always pause. Number one, just write the big stuff here. The first thing that happens to the sun's energy is it's reflected back into space. About 30%, so about a third, not quite, is reflected back into space. So it hits our atmosphere and bounces back. Reflected means it kind of bounces back into space. Has no effect on Earth. About 30% of it. About 20% is absorbed by the atmosphere. Okay? For example, ozone, O3, is going to absorb some of that and break up into O2 and O. So our atmosphere is going to absorb about 20% of that. Third, it's going to be absorbed by land and water. So so about half of the energy from the sun is going to get to the Earth's surface and be absorbed at the surface, whether it's on land and heating up the soil, whether it's heating up oceans. But about half is going to make it to the Earth's surface. So those are the three things that happen to energy from the sun. Okay, here's a term I want you to know. Radiation. Energy from the sun reaches us in the form of electromagnetic radiation. So, radiation. Energy from the sun reaches us in the form of electromagnetic magnetic radiation. Basically, what radiation is it's the transfer of energy through waves or rays. And the sun does this. If you've ever been outside and you're out in the sun and maybe it's kind of a cooler day, and kind of a cooler cloudy day, and all of a sudden the sun pops out and you suddenly feel warm. Okay, like suddenly your skin feels warm, okay? That's from radiation from the sun. The sun doesn't touch the earth, okay? But it shoots waves or rays of radiation towards the sun. Okay, this morning I made a breakfast burrito. It was a frozen one, okay? And I cooked it through radiation. What I did is I put it in the microwave. And the microwave is going to, the reason it's called a microwave is because it uses microwaves, which is a type of wave. And it's going to shoot these microwaves into my breakfast burrito. And when it does this, it's going to excite the molecules, the burrito molecules, okay? And those burrito molecules are going to vibrate, and it's going to create heat, and it's going to heat up my burrito. So if I wanted to heat up my burrito by radiation, I would use a microwave. So rays or waves. You don't need to write this. Most radiation from the sun passes through our atmosphere and is absorbed by Earth's surface and other objects. So one way of getting energy or heat is through radiation, waves or rays. The second is through conduction. Conduction, go ahead and write this. And I maybe underlined conduction, that's an important term here. Conduction is the transfer of energy from an object with a high temperature to an object with a lower temperature. So transferring heat from something that's hot to something that's colder. Okay, this morning I grabbed my breakfast burrito and I was running late. I didn't have time to throw it in the microwave and use radiation to heat it up. So instead, I grabbed the frozen burrito and I hopped in my car, okay? And I put the frozen burrito under my leg on the drive here. I heated it by conduction. By the time I got here, it was like not completely cold and I could eat it. My body transferred heat, okay? Our bodies are 98.6 degrees. Heat was transferred from our body to that burrito, which was frozen, so it was under 32 degrees. That is conduction. If you've ever walked on a hot sidewalk with your feet in the summer and it burns your feet, or it's super hot at the pool, okay, conduction is happening. That concrete is probably 120 degrees and your feet are 98.6 and the heat is being transferred from the concrete to your feet. That is conduction. Maybe you're cold and your first things that usually get cold are your hands and your feet, okay? And if your hands are cold, maybe you sit on them or you put them between your legs and it warms them up, because the bigger parts of your body, like your legs, your rear end, your core, produces more heat. Your fingers and toes produce less heat, okay? So you're transferring heat from your bigger parts to your smaller parts. That is conduction. Just what we said, asphalt, walking on it. Air can also be heated by conduction when it passes over warm water or land. Okay, so if we have a warm body of water and air goes over it, it will be heated as well, because it touches those molecules. It's through touching. Conduction is through touching. The third type of heat transfer is convection. Write this down: the transfer of heat due to the density differences in the air. The transfer of heat due to density differences in the air. A fireplace is a perfect example of convection. Okay, you have a fire. The air molecules closest to the fire are going to heat up. When they heat up, they expand, become less dense, and they rise. The cold air from higher up is going to sink because it's more dense. It's going to sink close to the fire where it's going to heat up and then rise. Okay, so you get this whole circle, this whole cycle of convection. Warm stuff rises, cold stuff sinks. That's convection. It happens in the ocean as well. Warm water rises, cold water sinks. So if I wanted to heat up my burrito through convection, I could add a fire, put it above the fire. Warm air rising, cold sinking. That would have heated up, that would have cooked it. We have a convection oven at our house where it has a fan in it that basically moves the heat around. Okay, so it bakes everything evenly. So we have radiation through waves and rays, conduction through touching, convection through density difference, warm stuff rising, cold stuff sinking. Another example, when you boil water, if you've ever boiled water in a pot, okay, the water that gets hot first is the water at the bottom because it's closest to the heat. That water is going to rise. The stuff on top is going to sink, and it's going to move like that. If you've ever seen water boil, you can actually see it move like that, okay, and it starts bubbling because of convection. One last story. My first year of teaching, I lived in an apartment building. There were 3 floors. I lived on the 2nd floor. And that winter that I lived there, I never turned on my heat because the people below me, I don't know if it was an older couple, but they must have ran their heat at a crazy high rate. Well, heat rises, it rose up to the second floor, okay, through the floor and into my apartment. So the people below me were paying to heat my apartment through convection, heat rising. I honestly, that winter, never turned on my heat one time. Okay, there were actually a couple times where I cracked windows because it was too hot, because of convection. Okay, so they were paying all of the bills and I was getting a lot of the benefits. That is notes for today.